Secure Act 2.0. And this was an act that was rushed through. I think it was signed by President Biden on December 23rd. And there was a lot in the omnibus bill that he signed. I mean, there's like $45 billion in aid for Ukraine and $40 billion for natural disasters and $773 billion for domestic programs and $858 billion for the military. And they overhauled the Electoral Account Act. They banned TikTok on government devices. They did some stuff for the Maine lobster industry. A whole bunch of stuff was in this bill. One of which is this retirement reform bill that's been bouncing around in Congress for the last year. And it's named the Secure Act 2.0, because as you recall from a few years ago, there was the Secure Act. This is the one that totally, nerfed the stretch IRA from something you could stretch over your entire life to only being able to do it for 10 years. It also raised the RMD age to 72. It was 70 and a half before that. It made it so you could pay off $10,000 of your student loan with a 529 plan. But mostly it kind of encouraged employers to get better 401ks. I had no idea Secure Act 2.0 was as big as it is. It has made a ton of changes to saving for retirement. And they all phase in different years over the next even 15 years that this thing's going to be phasing in. But it affects all kinds of things. And at first, when I realized how big it was, I was kind of disappointed because I'm like, we're going to have to update 100 pages on the White Coat Investor. And obviously, a whole bunch of stuff I've said on podcasts in the past is now out of date. And you just can't keep that much stuff up to date when they make these big changes. So I'm going to tell you about them. I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did in the blog post. If you want all the detail, go to whitecoatinvestor.com/secure-act-2-0. And that'll get you the full blog post. I published it, I think, the week after Christmas. It ran December 27th. We're just going to go through the highlights today. The highlights that you really need to know, the big changes that are likely to affect white coat investors. The first one, there's 6 or 7 sections in this. Let's see. They called them titles, and there's 6 titles, 1 through 6. And the first one's the longest one, I think, maybe the third one. But in the first one, they talk about basically retirement savings. Okay, and so I'm just going to talk about some highlights in this section. The first one is that all new 401ks starting in 2025 are going to have to start automatically enrolling participants to contribute at least 3%, not more than 10%, but at least 3%, and automatically increase those contributions 1% per year up to 10 to 15%, which is pretty awesome, I think. You can still opt out if you don't want to save for retirement. You don't have to, but now it's opt out instead of opt in. And I think that's going to get a lot more people saving for retirement. In sections 103 and 104, they changed the retirement savers credit to the savers match. And I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work, but basically the government is going to give you a match. And there may be a few residents and medical students that qualify for this. Most people make too much money. If you're listening to this podcast, you make too much money to qualify for the savers credit or this savers match. But basically, for those who don't have a high income, who save up to $2,000 for retirement in a retirement account, the government's going to give them $1,000 as a match instead of just a tax credit. I guess that's a little better. The RMD age is going up. Okay, it's 72 since the original Secure Act passed. Well, now it's going to be 73 starting in 2023. So if this is your year that you were going to have to start doing RMDs, you get one more year reprieve. And then it's going to go to 75 starting in 2033. So for those of you in your 40s like me, you're not going to have to take RMDs until you're 75. Obviously, you still can, and you can take that money out at any time, starting at 59 and a half, but you don't have to start taking any money out until 75. So that's another, 15 and a half years of tax-protected compounding that you can enjoy beyond age 59 and a half. All right, the IRA catch-up contributions used to be just $1,000. If the IRA contribution was $6,000, the catch-up was $1,000. The total was $7,000 for those who are 50 plus. Now that's going to be indexed to inflation, so it'll theoretically, go up as time goes on. That starts in 2024. You also get this new special catch up. And this is section 109 of the law. If you are 60, 61, 62, or 63, your catch-up contribution into a 401k isn't just going to be $6,500 that those who are 50 plus can make. It's going to be the greater of 10,000 or 50% more than the current catch-up contribution. So for 4 years there, you get to put an extra amount into your 401k to make sure you're ready to retire. I guess they think retirement age is 64, but that will also apply to simple IRAs. And so you'll have increased catch-up contributions in your 60s then. It doesn't start till 2025, by the way. Okay, another important change, employers are allowed to match your student loan payments. Now, they don't have to, but they're allowed to. So this is a possible benefit you might start seeing in employment contracts. The employer obviously has to put this program in place for all the employees. It's not just going to be you. But basically, they can allow you, if you're going to put a bunch of money and pay off your student loans, they can put money into your 401k for you for that. Just like they used to match employee contributions to the 401k, they can match your student loan payments into the 401k. So that's pretty cool. 403bs, simple IRAs, even governmental 457bs are going to be able to do this. There is going to be a new non-discrimination test to make sure it's not just the highly paid employees that are getting this benefit, but you may start seeing those starting in 2024. Okay, section 112. Small employers get a tax credit when they make military spouses immediately eligible for defined contribution plans. You know, most 401ks, you got to wait a year before you can use it. Well, if you're a military spouse, you're moving like every 3 years. So that means like a third of the time you're not able to use a 401k. You're kind of getting hosed. Well, this allows employers to get a tax credit if they will make those military spouses immediately eligible for the 401k match and to use the 401k. So that's pretty cool. Section 115. Emergency 401k and IRA withdrawals are now allowed without penalty. Actually, not now, but starting in 2024, they're allowed without penalty. Basically, you can take $1,000 out of your retirement account without paying the 10% penalty. You can put it back in if you want. And in fact, if you do that, if you put it back in later in the year, you can take another $1,000 out next year and do the same thing. So this kind of can function as a little bit of an emergency fund that way. If you don't repay it back in, you got to wait 3 years before you do it again. But I like this because it encourages low earners to put money into a retirement account, knowing that if it really gets bad and the excrement hits the ventilatory system, that you can get a little bit of money back out, and that you shouldn't feel like you can't save for retirement because you might need that money. Okay, section 116, employers are allowed to put more into simple IRAs. Basically, the possible match goes from 2% to 10%. Again, it's up to the employer. Can't be more than $5,000 indexed to inflation. That starts in 2024. So if for some reason you're using a simple IRA at your practice, maybe that's something you may want to look into doing. Simple IRA and 401k contribution limit is increasing. The contribution limits go up by 10% for the simple IRA and the simple 401k. So that's pretty cool. Section 118, if you have a nanny, you can now provide a SEP for them, a SEP IRA. So that's pretty cool. That starts this year. Starter 401k plans. This is a new account that's been created. And if you don't have a 401k or other employer plan, you can start one of these starter 401ks for your practice. It's a little weird, though. The contribution limit for it is exactly the same as the IRA contribution limit. So that's kind of a big downside because that's obviously dramatically less money than you can put in a real 401k. But it default enrolls employees this thing starts in 2024. So I don't really understand why an employer would choose this, but I assume it's going to be less costly to start. And so that may encourage some people to get started, with offering something for their employees. And it's not the same limit as the IRA. It's not the same contribution limit, but it's equal to it. So they'd be able to put, the employees would be able to put $6,500 into their IRA and $6,500 into this starter 401k. All right, Section 124 talks about the ABLE account disability age. Now, if you've got a disabled kid, you're probably paying attention to ABLE accounts. These are great. They're now available in almost all states. It used to be you had to be disabled before age 26 in order to have an ABLE account. Now, as long as you get disabled before age 46, you can have an ABLE account. So, there's many physicians on disability that might qualify for an ABLE account. So, something worth looking into. All right, Section 125. Part-time employees are now eligible for the 401k after 2 years. It used to be 3 years. So a little bit more eligibility for 401ks, help people save for retirement. Section 126, this is one everybody's talking about. Everybody loves this benefit. We don't understand exactly how it's going to work, but everybody's excited about it. This is the 529 to Roth IRA rollover. So essentially, let's say you save a little too much in a 529 for junior. They go to a cheaper college. They work harder than expected. They get a scholarship, whatever. You got too much money in the 529. Junior's now graduated from college. As long as that 529 has been established for at least 15 years, you can roll over up to $35,000 total out of that 529 into the beneficiary's Roth IRA. Now, this takes the place of their own contribution for that year. So if they're allowed to contribute $6,500 that year, this takes the place of that, right? $6,500 each year until that $35,000 is used up. So it gives you another option of what you can do with an overfunded 529. It encourages people to maybe save a little more in their 529s and to save better for retirement. I think this is a pretty good policy. It starts in 2024. I still think my kids' excess 529 contributions is just going to have the beneficiary change to their kids. But this gives you another option. Okay, something else that's really exciting. Section 127. This is a pension-linked emergency savings account. And this is cool. Employers don't have to, but can establish tax-free accounts for their non-highly compensated employees. These are called pension-linked savings account. You can opt employees in automatically with 3% of their compensation. The first $2,500 a year that comes out of their compensation sits in there as an emergency fund that they can raid anytime they want for emergencies, right? For whatever purpose they want. Once that account has at least $2,500 in it, anything extra goes into the employee's Roth 401k. And you can match their contributions as the employer 1-to-1, up to $2,500. You can withdraw from the account up to 4 times a year, totally penalty free. And when you leave the employer, you can just take the money out as cash, penalty free. You can roll it into a Roth IRA, or you can roll it into a Roth 401k. That starts in 2024. I think it's pretty awesome. I hope lots of employers adopt this. It's a little bit complicated for people to understand, but once they understand it, this thing's cool. It basically allows people to have an emergency fund, but have it growing tax-free. And if they don't need it, it just goes into the 401k. So it really encourages people to save for retirement. All right, Title II of the Secure Act 2.0 is all about annuities and retirement income. And I am not super excited about anything in Title II. Basically, it makes it easier to put annuities into retirement plans. And I don't know that's necessarily a good thing. I mean, there is sometimes a use for an annuity inside an IRA. It's a SPIA or a delayed income annuity, those sorts of things. There can be a role for it. However, the vast majority of annuities, like the vast majority of mutual funds, are terrible. And I don't want them in 401ks. And I think this is going to provide a little door for them to slip into 401ks. So I'm not thrilled about it. But Section 201 makes it a little easier to put annuities into retirement plans. There's a few other sections there in that section that are basically kind of pro-annuity sections. All right, Title III is all about retirement plan rule changes. And there's a lot in this section, but we're only going to touch on a few points. The first one, Section 302, the RMD penalty. If you didn't take out your required minimum distribution, the penalty on that is like the biggest penalty in the entire tax code. It's 50% of the amount you should have taken out. So if your RMD this year was 50 grand and you forgot to take it out, you literally have to write a check to the IRS for $25,000. That's the penalty. And this section, starting in 2023, cuts that penalty in half. It's still a terrible penalty at 25%, but it's not as bad as it was. All right, Section 307 changes qualified charitable distributions a little bit. This is like a great way for older retirees to give to charity. You're only allowed to put $100,000 of your RMD directly to charity, but that $100,000 is now indexed to inflation. So that's new with Secure Act 2.0. And you can also do a one-time $50,000 charitable distribution via a charitable trust or a charitable annuity. So that's pretty cool, I think, for QCDs. All right, Section 314. This is a new penalty-free withdrawal, a new reason you can get to your retirement account money before age 59 and a half. It's an exception to that 10% penalty, domestic abuse. If you have been the victim of domestic abuse, you can take out up to $10,000 or 50% of the balance, whichever is less, out of an IRA or a 401k without having to pay that 10% penalty. You can also repay the money for a period of 3 years. That starts in 2024. I don't know when the abuse has to have occurred, but that's when the withdrawals can start, is 2024. Okay, Section 317. Here's another cool one. A lot of people are like, oh, it's the end of the year. I don't have time to start a solo 401k, so I'm going to do a SEP IRA this year, and then I'm going to roll it into the solo 401k. Well, this makes it easier to not have to do that. Solo 401ks that are started after the calendar year can now get employer contributions, and that starts this year. I said employer contributions. I meant employee contributions. You were able to do employer contributions after the end of the calendar year, but now you can do the employee contributions too up until your tax day. So that's pretty cool that you can establish a solo 401k for 2022 in March of 2023, still make employee and employer contributions, which takes away, one of the reasons why people were using SEP IRAs instead of solo 401ks. All right. Section 324, they're going to standardize rollover paperwork. And if you've ever done rollovers with their 7 or 8 or 9 pages of paperwork, you will think this is a pretty cool thing to only have one piece of paper to deal with that's the same for every institution. So I think that's a good thing. Doesn't start till 2025. Okay, Section 325 corrects what I see as an error that they've had. It used to be that Roth 401ks had required minimum distributions and Roth IRAs did not. No more. Neither one of them have required minimum distributions starting in 2024. All right, Section 326. This is another exception to the 10% early withdrawal penalty, terminal illness. Now you get diagnosed with cancer at 55, you can now take everything out of your IRA without paying that 10% penalty. Section 331. You've been seeing this stuff if you prepare your own taxes, you're always seeing this stuff about disasters and being in a disaster area and how you get benefits for being in a disaster area. Well, here's another one of those. If you're in a disaster area, you can take money out of your retirement plan, up to $22,000, penalty free, in the event of a federal disaster. And then you can then spread the taxes on that withdrawal over 3 years. You can also repay the money into your retirement account. In fact, if you bought a house and then it was in a disaster area, if you bought a house using, $10,000 you pulled out of your IRA, you can repay that too once it's been in a disaster area. And employers are actually allowed to allow a larger amount to be borrowed out of the 401k in a disaster. So this one's interesting. I think it's the only change in Secure Act 2.0 that's retroactive. It's actually retroactive to January 26, 2021. And that made me curious, right? That it's this weird date, January 26, 2021. So I was trying to figure out what the disaster was on January 26, 2021. And I couldn't figure out what it was. But anyway, any disaster you've had since then, you've now got the ability to retire or to withdraw from your retirement accounts. Okay, Section 334, another exception to the 10% early withdrawal penalty, long-term care premiums. You can use up to $2,500 per year to pay long-term care premiums without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty. That one doesn't start till 2026, though. Okay, Section 337, special needs trusts. You can have a charity as a remainder beneficiary. That's new. You didn't used to be able to do that. Basically, it can provide for your disabled kid or whatever for years and years and years. And when they die, whatever's left, it can go to your favorite charity. All right, Section 348. If you have a hybrid cash balance plan, which lots of docs out there do, there's a technical adjustment made to it that basically prohibits the backloading of benefit accruals and allows plan sponsors to provide larger pay credits to older, longer service employees. So if you've got a hybrid cash balance plan, this is a conversation you ought to have with your plan provider this year. All right, titles 4 and 5, nothing very interesting in there, just some technical stuff. Section or title 6, though, has got some really interesting stuff. In section 601, there are now going to be Roth simple IRAs and Roth SEP IRAs. Those start this year in 2023. You're going to be able to have a Roth SEP IRA, which is one of the main reasons I've been telling people that they got to get a solo 401k instead of a SEP IRA, is because that traditional tax-deferred SEP IRA balance screws up their backdoor Roth IRA pro rata calculation. Well, a Roth SEP IRA isn't going to screw that up because that is not going to show up on line 8 of Form 8606. So this is an option that allows people to use a SEP IRA instead of a slightly more complicated solo 401k and still do their backdoor Roth IRA each year. Section 603, I call this the Rothification of catch-up contributions for high earners. Okay? No longer will catch-up contributions for high earners, those making $145,000 plus this year, and that's indexed to inflation, is going to be allowed to be tax deferred. The catch-up contributions are going to have to be Roth for you doctors and other high earners out there. And that starts in 2024. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they want to make more money. They don't want you to defer so much, tax till later, but it's all going to be Roth starting in a year. All catch-up contributions are Roth. Section 604, the match can now be Roth too. Any matching dollars you get from your employer can be Roth. This is going to cause people to, of course, have lots of decisions to make about whether they want it to be Roth or tax deferred. And as an employer, whether you want to offer Roth matching contributions is not required, but your employer can offer it. That includes those matches on any student loan payments that you made. That starts, actually, I guess this one's retroactive too. Well, no, it's not. It starts on the day the act was passed, which was in 2022. So that your employers can now do Roth matching contributions if they want. So we've got a discussion here at the White Coat Investor. We got to decide which of these features we're going to add to our 401k. If it's going to be the world's best 401k, we have to have all the features, right? So that's one we're probably going to add. How that's going to work exactly is not entirely clear, but it sounds like anything that goes in there as a matching contribution is going to show up on your W-2 as taxable income, right? The employer is not going to pay the tax on it. You're still going to pay the tax on that matching contribution. All right, Section 605, finally, they're putting some teeth into these charitable conservation easement deductions, right? They've been warning they're going to do this for years. Conservation easements have been a special category that the IRS says, we're watching you if you're doing these. Well, basically, they've made it so you can't abuse them quite as much. And so the limit here is that the deduction can only be 2.5 times each partner's relevant basis. And why is that significant? Well, because people were taking like a 7 or 8 or 10x deduction before. And of course, it makes sense to spend $100,000 to get $1 million deduction, right? But it does not make sense to spend $100,000 to get a $250,000 deduction, because how much tax are you going to save on a $250,000 deduction? Oh, about $100,000, about what you spent. So it's a little bit more fair, and I think people are going to start using conservation easements a lot less than they have in the past, which is probably a good thing because they were widely abused. Okay, Title VII is just about helping the tax court judges get a little bit better retirement plan, and that's it. That's the Secure Act 2.0. There's a ton in there. I mean, listen to all those changes. Think about how many things I've told you in the past on this podcast that are now out of date. And I'm sorry, I don't change the rules. I don't make the rules. I just tell you what they are. But there's going to be a lot of changes to rules that are going to affect the way you save for retirement.
The hosts of the White Coat Investor podcast are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is free entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.